Well, let's go to Canberra now for our political panel, where political correspondent Gillian Bradford is joined by the Liberals' Dan Tehan and Labor's Richard Marles.
Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us today. Now, look, it didn't get a mention in question time today, but I have a little doubt the first sitting day of the year will be remembered for an issue no one could have predicted: Tony Abbott's reaction about a remark on the fields of Afghanistan. Let's have a look now at how he reacted when confronted by this video last night by Channel 7.
No, it's really obvious that shit happens, doesn't it?
How's that turning into a media circus? Okay, well, tell me, what's the context, and if it's out of context, what is the context? You're not saying anything, Tony.
Well, Dan T, and they say silence is golden. Was this the best way to react to that?
Oh, I thought it was a very dignified silence, and I think that's what it deserved, and I think Tony handled it appropriately.
Richard?
I think these things are difficult. What's clear is that we all support the troops in Afghanistan. Whenever an Australian soldier loses their life, that is a tragedy, and I think every member of Parliament treats that very seriously. None of us would treat that lightly, including Tony Abbott, and I don't think he was treating this flippantly or lightly.
You would have both had media training 101 when you come into Parliament. What do they say to do when you're confronted by these uneasy questions?
I don't think on a question like that, I don't think there is an easy answer to it, and I think that's why Tony handled it appropriately and in a very dignified manner.
Look, I mean, it's stating the obvious that we're all going to be judged on the way in which we present ourselves publicly, but on this issue and the substance of the issue, which is the support that all of us have for our troops in Afghanistan, it's clear they have all of our support, and that includes Tony Abbott, and I don't think he was trying to be flippant.
Will his reaction to this, will there be any lingering doubts about his performance left, not on the substance, but on the reaction?
I don't think so. I think Tony's done an outstanding job since he's taken over the leadership. I think he's taken the fight up to the government, and I think he's going to continue to do so, and he'll deliver us government at the next election.
Now, it was a rather subdued beginning to question time today. I think it was only about question 4 that we finally got some jeers in there.
That's true.
And that was when John Fay's name was mentioned, I think, heading up this reconstruction inspectorate. Now, Richard Marles, that is the question. Why did you have to go to John Fay? Did anyone give Lindsay Tanner a call? He's a bit of a loose end.
Oh, look, I think it was John Fay is a good choice. He's somebody with the experience to perform this job. I think what is clear is that this isn't a matter of partisan politics. It's not about choosing one of theirs or one of ours. It's just about choosing somebody who can do the job, and John Fay fits that criteria.
I do know on your backbench, though, there have been groans of not another Liberal given Peter Costello a job. You've given Downer one, you've given Brendan Nelson one.
Well, look, I think what we're about in terms of government is making sure that we've got the best people to do the right jobs, and I think what we've demonstrated is that in choosing people for these kinds of positions, we're not taking party affiliation into account. I think that's an admirable thing, and actually I think that's the preponderance of view within the Labor side of politics.
Smart politics from their side. There's not many people who don't respect John Fay.
No, there's not, and he'll do an outstanding job, but I think it goes to highlight that when it comes to managing money, you need the Liberal Party to be doing it, and I think the Labor Party is learning that, and I think the Australian people are learning that.
Well, in terms of managing money and the Liberals managing money, what would be good is to see, a proper accounting of finding the money to actually pay for the recovery. I mean, when it comes to that issue, we are poles apart in terms of our credibility about actually trying to fund the reconstruction of the flood-affected areas in both Queensland and Victoria. I mean, there is an utter lack of credibility on the part of the Liberal Party's announcement of what cuts they're doing to aid in terms of the Indonesian schools, to support for the car industry, which of course is very important for the region in which Dan and I live, for the water buyback scheme. I mean, this shows that to suggest that you can cut that because there is some water around at the moment, when we all know that we were in drought just 2 years ago, and this is a continent which changes one from the other very quickly, shows the Liberal Party have all the vision of a goldfish on this.
Well, let's get to that. I remember 2007, John Howard stood here in Parliament House and really told us the Murray-Darling was the most important challenge facing this nation. Now, to cut water buybacks when it's plentiful, when it's cheap, is a false economy.
I don't think so, and I've been part of the Regional Affairs Committee, which has been looking into the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. I think that the government has rushed this. I think we actually need to put a halt on the buybacks and make sure that what we're doing is sustainable for all communities that live along the river. So I think it's actually a sensible move, and I think, you know, taking hard decisions is never popular, but we've shown that we can do that, and we will continue to do it. And that's why when it comes to managing the economy and managing the taxpayers' money, we do a better job.
Well, let's get to another one of those spending cuts now on foreign aid. You were a diplomat in a previous life, and to quote Greg Sheridan, the schools program to Indonesia is cutting the best part of our aid program. It's not the smartest way to pay for a flood levy, is it?
No, well, look, we've postponed that, and there needs to be a review of it. The government, it seems,
the World Bank has incidentally already looked into that program and said it's had good results.
Well, there's been an internal review done by the government. If the government's got nothing to hide, let it come out and detail that review. Let's have a public look at it, and let's see that our aid money is being spent properly. The trouble is with this government, when it comes to spending the taxpayers' money, no one has confidence in what they're doing, and our foreign aid budget, sadly, is falling into that category as well.
Have you got any reason to believe in this particular program that there has been any misspending? Because it has been universally lauded as one of our best programs.
No, well, we don't, because we've seen nothing publicly on it. All we've seen is an internal review on it. Why doesn't the government come clean on that internal review, show us the facts of it, and then we can deal with it?
There's no issue about the accountability of this money, in the sense that, we're reporting that in question time today. And as you rightly said, the World Bank have looked at this. There's been a review of this program. It is one of the best aid programs going around. And what we're seeing with the Liberal Party is really flailing around in an attempt to find the money so that they can have a position where they don't have to support us in relation to the flood levy. There's the latest viral email campaign going around about supporting Indonesian schools, and the Liberal Party say, why don't we jump on that one, without thinking through the fact that this is one of the most important programs we have. And Alexander Downer himself has said that this is one of the most low-profile but effective ways of dealing with counter-terrorism. So to be cutting this is absolutely crazy in terms of our national interest.
Well, there was a lot of robust debate when we examined the cuts, and we don't hide from that. I mean, we don't have a gang of four which gets behind closed doors and does all this in a secret way. We do it openly and transparently, and there was some robust debate, and that's good and healthy democracy.
Now, to come to another issue on carbon, there's new modelling out today showing just how hard Australia is finding it giving up on fossil fuels. Dan, is it time that we have to bite the bullet, get serious and bring in a price on carbon?
Well, I think the report showed that we're meeting our Kyoto targets, and that's a very good start.
Not by 2020.
And I think also what it showed was that you don't need to introduce a carbon tax to do this. There are other ways. There are ways that we put forward at the last election which we could do it, which wouldn't mean you're taxing the Australian people at a time of national difficulty.
Would it achieve such deep cuts, though? This is pretty serious, a 24% increase. There's nothing around the margins that's going to deliver you a cut of that size.
Well, no one has come out and said that our policy that we took to the last election wouldn't deliver those cuts by 2020. We went through, we detailed that during the election campaign, and there was no criticism of what we put forward. So our approach would deliver that result.
We are in a really serious situation in terms of trying to curb our carbon emissions. That's the simple fact of the matter here. In 2009, business as usual was going to lead to a 21% increase. Now, 2 years later, it's showing it's going to be a 24% increase on 2000 levels. So that means the task is that much harder. Everyone knows we've got to put a price on carbon. That's why we have the multi-party working committee on climate change. Everyone is sitting around the table with the exception of the Liberal Party. We've got NGOs, we've got the business community, we've got all the other parties in this building except for the coalition. And can I say, Dan, there is a seat there waiting for you guys. What this really says is now is the time for you guys to come to the party and work with us to actually come up with a solution to what is a really pressing problem for this country.
Let's talk about cuts around the margins, though, because a lot of people have equally criticised Labor for some of the schemes that you've adopted. To get serious about this, the old ETS, petrol was exempt. At some point, you're going to have to tell consumers they've got to pay for fossil fuels. When are you going to take the hard decision about subsidising fossil fuels costing $4 billion a year?
Well, I think the most important thing we've got to do here, which will give indicators in a sense to all these things, including the question you've just asked, is putting a price on carbon. You know, as soon as we have a price on carbon in one form or another, that is going to give the proper indicator to the market, if you like, which will see us developing alternative fuel sources, renewable energy sources, which enable us to deal with those kinds of issues.
Should consumers pay more for petrol?
Oh, well, what we need to be doing is putting a price on carbon in relation to trying to curb our emissions. That is the fundamental task, and that is what we're pursuing doing.
Gillian, I don't think Richard answered your question then, but I would say also on this subject, the Carbon Farming Initiative, which was, we saw a draft proposal legislation introduced early January when most farmers were either doing harvest, ended up they were dealing with floods and everything. I thought it was a rather tricky time for them to introduce the consultations on that part of legislation, and what I would like to see from the government is for them to extend that consultation time on that piece of legislation, because I thought it was a rather inappropriate time for them to introduce it.
Just back to this question though, there's a report today in the Courier Mail that 1,500 air conditioning units a week get installed in Queensland. Australians are buying LCD TVs and big plasmas. That pumps out heat and we're all putting in air conditioners.
Yeah.
When are we going to have to pay to have these things, pay extra?
Well, where we need to get to is having a price on carbon in the economy. It comes back to that. I mean, the thing that is that you're pointing to as a problem in relation to those purchases is that the emissions that they give rise to. Now, once we actually have a price in the economy associated with those emissions, well, then you're going to see a whole lot of activity which comes to terms with that.
Does that equal consumers having to pay more for petrol, more for these consumables that put up greenhouse gases?
Well, we have. Well, I suppose the answer to that question depends on what the outcome of the multi-party committee comes up with. In terms of the CPRS, the basic model there was that you put a price on carbon to the extent that gives rise to a cost in living. There was a compensation package within it. Now, maybe that is where the multi-party committee ends up with. Maybe they go somewhere different. But I think at this point, what we actually need is everybody around the table, and that includes the coalition, so that we can start working out these questions and work out how we put a price on carbon within our economy, which is the fundamental thing we need to do to address all the questions you're asking.
Gentlemen, sorry to interrupt you there. It is just the start of 2011. Hopefully we'll have answers by the end of it. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you, Gillian.
And thanks to Gillian Bradford in Canberra with that panel.